Guilty knowledge. This is a method that involves, quote, the detection of knowledge about a crime as a means for inferring deception. Bryan Kohberger also put his trash in neighbors' trash cans. No alibi. Still no alibi.
Can the prosecution show links from Bryan to Maddie?
He was in fact fired.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Today we're going to be diving into the new defense motion. Has there been a rush to judgment in the Bryan Kohberger case? And I'm going to talk about cameras in the courtroom and whether or not the prosecutor plans to seek capital punishment in this case in just a second, so please stay with me. There are less than 30 days before the prosecution must decide if they're going to be pursuing the death penalty for Bryan Kohberger, what do the families want in this case, and we're going to dig into the DNA evidence along with the lack thereof. And according to defense attorney Ann Taylor, there is, quote, no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. And if you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, and I see looking at the analytics that 70% of the people who are watching this channel don't hit the subscribe button, could you please subscribe? It really helps the channel out, it helps me out, and it's completely free. And we have so much to dig into with these new motions. The defense is speaking to us through the motions, so let's get started. So Ann Taylor is now saying in the Friday motion filed by the defense that there is no DNA belonging to Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, or Ethan that has been found in Bryan's apartment, home, office, or car. This is leaving many people to wonder if Bryan did this or if he is being railroaded by an overly zealous prosecution anxious to get the case closed. So what motive would law enforcement have to pin something like this on an innocent person? Well, it is possible they would have wanted to get this wrapped up quickly to protect the University of Idaho and their reputation. So was there a rush to judgment in this case? We've seen innocent people, like in the Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner case, Cindy Sue Hunter, who was crowdsourced by Kylan's dad and whose only crime was to find Kylan and Crystal. We saw her being railroaded by law enforcement who were anxious to close this case. They tried to pin it on her. So did that happen here to Bryan Kohberger? So I've really tried to bring you balanced coverage in this case, and I want to talk about guilty knowledge. This is a method that involves, quote, the detection of knowledge about a crime as a means for inferring deception. So as critical thinkers, let's look at Bryan's behavior, and I just want to contrast this with what the defense is putting out, because Ann Taylor's job is to poke holes in the case, and we haven't seen any of the prosecution's evidence. But let's look at the guilty knowledge. We know the shower curtain was missing from the Pullman, Washington apartment, and I shared with you in the last video who takes a shower curtain with them on vacation to go visit their parents. The other thing we've heard is that Bryan was cleaning his car wearing surgical gloves. Now, imagine if you committed this crime and you realized you left the knife sheath behind. And I've heard people say you can't have it both ways, underneath Maddie and also next to Maddie. Yes, it can. It can be underneath her and also poking out to the side, and that would be a correct way to describe how the knife sheath was found. But imagine if you were Bryan Kohberger, you knew you left that knife sheath behind, you went back at 9 o'clock in the morning to see, do I need to get this knife sheath back? But you don't want to go into the house because you're not sure if you can get in and out undetected. What do? You get rid of every little bit of DNA you can. You clean that car over and over and over. You would take the shower curtain with you. Bryan Kohberger also put his trash in neighbors' trash cans. Is that a sign of guilty knowledge, in your opinion? So if you like having all of the information so you can make up your own mind, then you are in the right place. We have a lot of smart people here at Reporter Room, and I look forward to reading your comments. So Jennifer Coffindaffer posted, and she was pushing back on this a little bit, so I'm going to show you both sides. So let's start with Jennifer Coffindaffer's post, and she clearly believes that the evidence is still pointing to Bryan, and here's what she posted, and then I'm going to share with you some things that I think don't point to Bryan. She wrote, quote, "Make no mistake, cleaning blood using bleach and other products degrades DNA. Sadly, reality is not like TV." And we've talked about the CSI effect before. Do expect this to be like a CSI episode where they have, hair in the hands of the victims and blood under their fingernails. And I'm going to talk about cameras in the courtroom and whether or not the prosecutor plans to seek capital punishment in this case in just a second, so please stay with me. But she also continues on. She said, quote, "Also recall, we don't know if there is no DNA. We only know what it says in the defense filing. Depending on what the killer did to protect his car interior, like covering it with plastic, and if he removed all of his blood-soaked clothing, gloves, masks, and shoes into plastic bags outside of his vehicle, and if he was smart enough to use booties on his feet after the murders, and if he had plastic liners inside his Newtrite gloves and removed his gloves post-haste inside out, placing them in the plastic, and if he painstakingly cleaned every crevice of his interior with bleach, yes, it's possible that DNA was not found, even if blood was found." And remember, luminol, and she wrote, luminol does not find DNA. Many think if Bryan Kohberger was responsible, then he was not very bright using his own car, bringing his own phone, perhaps, but I give him a lot of credit if he committed these crimes, but for the dropping of the knife sheath, law enforcement still might be searching for the killer. She also, so that's the end of her quote, and she also linked her post on Twitter to an article titled "Evaluation of Different Cleaning Strategies for Removal of Contaminating DNA Molecules." So Bryan would have had plenty of time to clean his car, his apartment. We know the shower curtain was missing, but let's look at the flip side of this. Is Bryan being railroaded by an overzealous prosecution, anxious to close its case to protect the Idaho State University? And I'm going to talk about cameras in the courtroom and whether or not the prosecutor plans to seek capital punishment in this case in just a second, so please stay with me. So Bryan's defense attorney, Ann Taylor, is raising concerns about the absence of DNA evidence linking Bryan to the crime. In a recently released filing, the defense claims that no DNA belonging to the 4 victims was found in his apartment, office, or car, leaving many to wonder how he, and I mean Bryan, would create such a bloody crime scene but managed to leave without bringing any trace of DNA home with him. Now, the prosecution announced to us back on May 12th that the defense team was given access to items seized, including the car. And we know they were at the house. We have pictures of them at that 1122 King Road house. So it's very possible that what Ann Taylor is relying on is not what the prosecution was able to gather from Bryan's car, and not the discovery information provided by the prosecution, but what her own investigators found when they went through the crime scenes. They would have done their own forensics. So the defense is stating that no victim DNA in the car, apartment, or Bryan's office. This is very likely the defense's own first-hand knowledge. The defense is also arguing that the state of Idaho targeted Bryan without sufficient evidence, and Ann Taylor is comparing the law enforcement investigation to a lineup where the government already had a, quote, predetermined suspect in mind. Ann Taylor is also questioning the FBI's involvement in the investigation, and she believes that they have a bias against Bryan Kohberger. Is she right? Will the touch DNA on the knife sheath, along with the phone pings and any other evidence that we don't know about that the prosecution have, be enough to convict Bryan? Or will the jury want to see Bryan's DNA under one of the victim's fingernails or something like that? And this is your friendly reminder that Ann Taylor has still not provided that alibi that was due weeks ago in this case. So Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson was given a 60-day time frame on May 22nd to file a notice of intent of whether he is going to be seeking capital punishment or not. And we are learning that he has been meeting with family members of the victims to make this determination. And John Judge ruled that journalists are allowed to interview family members involved in the case, but not lawyers, and cameras will be allowed without a live video feed. Thank you so much for watching.